They told me my husband died in a flood 5 years ago. There was a police report, a funeral, even a death certificate. I mourned him. I buried him, at least, I thought I did. And then, last week, my 9-year-old daughter pointed across the school playground and said, "Mom, that's Daddy." I laughed. At first. Because dead men don't show up at elementary schools, waving at little girls who aren't theirs, right? But then she said something that stopped me cold. He has the scar. The one above his eyebrow. Just like in the picture on my nightstand. I didn't believe her. Until I saw him myself. Until I looked into the eyes of a man I had loved, grieved, and tried to forget. And he looked right back at me. He had a new name. A new life. And a daughter that wasn't mine. That was the moment my entire world shifted. Because the man I thought was dead hadn't just faked his death. He had faked our entire life. What happens next? You're not ready for it. But neither was I. Rachel Taylor never imagined she'd be planning a funeral before her 33rd birthday, let alone one with no body to bury. She was 32 when her husband, Ethan, disappeared. One minute he was calling from the road, saying he'd be late because of the storm rolling over the Pacific Northwest. The next, he was gone. Just gone. No final words. No second call. Just silence, and then the knock on her door. It was a Tuesday night in early April, the kind of night where the rain comes sideways and every tree looks like it might rip from its roots. Rachel remembered every detail, the smell of leftover pasta still on the stove, the lullaby playing softly in the background as she rocked their daughter Lily to sleep, the way her stomach sank when the doorbell rang after 10 p.m. 2 police officers stood on her porch. There'd been an accident, they said. A car, matching her husband's, had veered off a bridge just outside of Bend, Oregon. They'd found the vehicle downstream, twisted, half-submerged. His phone and wallet were inside. But no sign of Ethan. Divers searched the river for days. Helicopters scanned the nearby woods. Rescue dogs were brought in. But nothing. The currents were strong, they said. It was possible, likely, his body had been swept into the deep bends of the river, possibly all the way into the Columbia. After 2 weeks, the search was called off. After 3, the death certificate arrived. Rachel held it in her hands like a foreign object. One piece of paper, that's all it took to declare a man dead. She'd been married to Ethan for 6 years. They met in college, she studied early childhood education, he was studying finance. They were the kind of couple that didn't shout their love from the rooftops, they didn't need to. There was a comfort between them, a quiet understanding that made everything feel solid. Safe. At least, it had. After the funeral, a closed casket, a photo of Ethan propped on an easel beside his favorite running shoes, Rachel tried to keep life moving for Lily's sake. Their daughter had just turned 4. She didn't understand the concept of death, only absence. For weeks, she asked when Daddy was coming home. Rachel answered with stories and hugs and tears. She tried to cry only after bedtime. They moved from Bend to a quieter suburb near Portland, closer to Rachel's sister. She took a job as an administrative assistant at Lily's new elementary school. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave her flexible hours and enough income to support their modest life. The house was small but warm. There were still photos of Ethan on the shelves. Lily wouldn't let her take them down. Every night, they'd do daddy talks. Lily would ask questions, and Rachel would answer. What did Daddy like to eat? What songs did he sing in the car? Did Daddy love me? More than anything, Rachel would always say. But no amount of bedtime stories or memorial traditions could fill the hole Ethan left. Especially because that hole wasn't just about grief, it was about doubt. Rachel had always found something strange about the way he vanished. The missing body. The open driver's door. The fact that the weather had been bad, but not apocalyptic. At one point, in the first few months, she even Googled how to disappear. Not because she thought he had, but because she needed to understand how easy or impossible it might have been. She told herself she was being paranoid. That trauma made people suspicious. That the man she loved couldn't do something so cruel. That he had loved Lily. That he had loved her. So she buried the questions, tucked them behind the grief, and rebuilt. By year 3, she stopped wearing her wedding ring on her finger. Instead, she wore it on a chain, tucked under her shirt. A symbol of the love she lost, or perhaps of the version of Ethan she still held onto. She never dated again. Not seriously. There was one man, a teacher named Josh, kind and gentle. But when he leaned in to kiss her goodnight on their third date, she pulled away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. Because no one else could compete with the ghost of Ethan Taylor. Lily grew older. Smarter. Her father's eyes and her mother's sense of justice. She'd inherited Ethan's quiet focus and Rachel's emotional sharpness. They were close, more like best friends than mother and daughter sometimes. They made pancakes on Sundays. They planted tulips every spring. They were a unit. And if Rachel sometimes stared out the window too long, or reached for her phone at 10 p.m. before realizing no one was calling, well, that was just part of learning to live with loss. Life moved on. Until one day, in the middle of an ordinary week, her daughter came home from school and said something that shattered everything. "Mom, I saw Daddy today." It started as an ordinary Wednesday. Willow Creek Elementary was buzzing with excitement. Field day was finally here. The sun had actually shown up for once, painting the Oregon sky a rare, cloudless blue. Kids sprinted across the grass in mismatched sneakers, paper numbers pinned to their t-shirts, their laughter echoing across the field. Rachel had the day off but volunteered to help set up the parent booth. She watched from the shade as Lily, now 9, lined up with her classmates for the potato sack race. Same wild ponytail. Same determined brow. Same little wave she always gave her mom, half embarrassed, half sweet. Rachel smiled, distracted for only a moment by her phone buzzing in her tote. A message from the school's payroll office. By the time she looked up again, Lily was frozen. Not physically, her sack race hadn't even started, but emotionally. Her face had drained of color, her arms limp by her sides. Rachel followed her daughter's line of sight across the playground. A man stood near the chain-link fence, waving at a girl in a purple jacket. He looked like any other dad. Jeans. Button down. Sunglasses on top of his head. But something about the way he stood, the curve of his smile, the exact tilt of his chin, it pulled a thread in Rachel's memory she didn't even know was still loose. The girl in the purple jacket waved back and ran to him, calling, "Daddy." He bent down to hug her, ruffling her hair. Rachel squinted. No. It couldn't be. The man turned slightly. And that's when she saw it. A faint scar above his right eyebrow. Diagonal. Small, but distinct. The same scar Ethan had gotten in college after slipping on a frozen sidewalk. Rachel used to joke it gave him mysterious dad energy. He always hated it. Her chest tightened. No. No, no. It's a coincidence. A look-alike. A trick of the light. Lots of men have sandy blonde hair. A lot of dads wear that exact weekend casual outfit. And scars? Scars happen. She told herself that, over and over. Later that afternoon, Lily was quiet in the car. Too quiet. Rachel glanced over as they waited in the pickup lane traffic. "You okay, bug?" Lily hesitated. Then, "Mom. I saw Daddy today." Rachel's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Here we go again, she thought. Another dream. Another sign. A birthday wish coming to life. Lily had spoken about her dad before, seen him in crowds, felt his presence in the breeze, heard his voice in lullabies. Rachel had always tried to honor that. Let Lily talk. Let her believe in the idea of him still being close. But this felt different. You mean, like a feeling? Rachel said gently. Lily shook her head. No. Like, I saw him. At school. He was there. Standing by the fence. Waving to a girl. Her name's Samantha. She's in Mrs. Keller's class. Rachel's heart stuttered. Are you sure it looked like Daddy? She asked. Lily's voice went firm. He had the scar. Right here. She tapped above her right eyebrow. And his smile. And his laugh. He looked at me, Mom. He saw me. Then he turned away real fast. Rachel didn't speak. She couldn't. She wanted to brush it off. To tell Lily she was mistaken. To explain away the resemblance like a rational adult. But deep down, something gnawed at her. The same something that had been quiet for 5 years but was now stretching awake like a sleeping beast. That night, Lily refused to eat her dinner. She pushed peas around her plate, head down. Rachel tried to play it cool. Long day? Lily didn't respond. Then, do you believe me? Rachel's fork froze midair. I believe you think you saw something, she said carefully. That's not what I asked. Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. Do you believe it was him? Rachel swallowed. Sweetheart, sometimes when we miss people, our brain fills in the blanks. Our hearts want them so badly, we start to see them in others. Lily's eyes filled. You don't believe me. Before Rachel could answer, Lily stood and walked to her room. No tantrum. No yelling. Just disappointment, the kind that hits deeper than anger. After Lily was asleep, curled up beneath the quilt Ethan's mother had made, Rachel sat alone on the couch, wine untouched. She opened the photo album, the one they called Daddy's book, and flipped through wedding pictures, beach trips, Ethan reading bedtime stories. There it was. The scar. Clear as day in a candid photo of him chasing Lily through autumn leaves. Rachel closed the album. What if? What if it was him? But how? He was dead. Dead. There'd been police. Reports. A funeral. A sealed insurance case. Her therapist. Her in-laws. Everyone grieved him. Built lives around the certainty of his absence. Still, the scar. The next morning, she called the school. Hey, Denise, she said to the front office secretary. Do you have the info on Samantha? New student in Keller's class? Sure, Denise said. Sweet kid. Moved here from Colorado. Lives with her dad. Mom passed from cancer last year, poor thing. Rachel's stomach turned. And the dad? She asked casually. Daniel Harper. Really involved. Actually started volunteering for the reading program. Nice guy, reminds me of your Ethan, actually. Rachel froze. I shouldn't have said that, Denise backtracked quickly. I just meant, tall, same kind of energy, you know? No. Rachel didn't know. She couldn't know. Not yet. But the pieces were starting to shift. To slide into place. She ended the call with shaky hands and one thought looping in her head. If it wasn't Ethan, why did it feel so much like him? The next morning, Rachel found a drawing taped to Lily's bedroom door. It was a simple sketch, crayon on lined notebook paper, but the details made Rachel stop cold. A man and a young girl stood side by side, holding hands near a parked car. The man had sandy blonde hair, a blue shirt, and a faint line above his eyebrow, labeled with an arrow, Daddy's scar. Beneath the drawing, in Lily's careful handwriting, were the words, "Samantha's dad equals my dad?" Rachel stared at the page, her fingers trembling slightly. Lily didn't draw things like this lightly. She wasn't a child prone to fantasy. If anything, she was sharp, painfully observant. Rachel had always said Lily noticed things most kids overlooked. The kind of kid who could spot a typo on a cereal box or sense when someone was lying just by the way their voice shifted. This wasn't imagination. It was memory. Or worse, recognition. Rachel couldn't ignore it anymore. She pulled out an old accordion folder from her bedroom closet, one she hadn't opened in years. Inside were documents she'd sworn she'd never need to look at again, the police report, the insurance claim, the death certificate that had sealed Ethan's fate. She spread them out on the kitchen table and read through every word. Vehicle located approximately 0.6 miles downstream from Lakeside Bridge, driver's side door found open, no remains recovered. Presumed drowned. No body recovered. Case closed due to insufficient evidence of foul play. Everything had seemed so official at the time. So absolute. But reading it now, with 5 years of distance, and that scar burning a hole in her brain, the language felt fragile. Conditional. Full of cracks. Rachel's gut twisted. Later that day, during her break at work, she slipped into the school's front office under the pretense of dropping off a form. She kept her voice light, casual. "Hey Denise, quick question. Do you have a volunteer list for the reading program? I want to see who's coming in this semester." "Sure," Denise said, spinning her monitor around slightly. "We've got a few new folks, here's the schedule. Thursdays are packed." Rachel scanned the list and there it was, plain as day. Daniel Harper, background check, complete, photo ID on file. "Daniel Harper," Rachel said out loud. "Samantha's dad?" "Yep," Denise replied. "He's been great with the kids. Honestly, kind of a natural. Super calm. You know, he kind of reminds me of your husband." There it was again. That sentence. Second time in 48 hours. Rachel smiled thinly. "Would it be weird if I asked to see his ID photo?" Denise hesitated. "Technically, we can't just share files with anyone, but since you're staff, just a peek?" She clicked a file open. Rachel leaned in. The image was low-res, but it didn't need to be clearer. Same jawline. Same faint crow's feet at the corners of the eyes. Same damn scar. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She muttered something about needing to get back to class and bolted out of the office before Denise could ask any questions. In her car, she sat frozen behind the wheel for a full 5 minutes, staring at nothing. Her heart beat like it was trying to warn her, or maybe wake her. If that really was Ethan, what the hell was he doing here? More importantly, why had he never come back? That night, Lily watched cartoons while Rachel sat in her bedroom, laptop open, typing faster than her thoughts. Daniel Harper, Colorado. Daniel Harper plus Samantha plus obituary. Daniel Harper financial advisor. After 20 minutes of sifting through dead ends and LinkedIn profiles, she found a lead. A business listing in Denver. Harper Financial Planning, established 4 years ago. Owner, D. Harper. No photo. No personal details. She called the number. A voicemail answered. "You've reached Harper Financial. Please leave your name and number, and we'll return your call shortly." Rachel's blood turned to ice. The voice was different. Slightly deeper. Slower. But the cadence. The pauses. The breath at the end of the sentence. She knew that voice. She hung up without leaving a message. When she went to kiss Lily goodnight, her daughter looked up at her with those Ethan eyes and whispered, "Did you see him too, Mommy?" Rachel nodded slowly. "I saw someone who looked like Daddy. But I don't know yet, sweetheart. I don't know who he really is." Lily sat up. "Can you find out?" Rachel wrapped her in a hug. "I'm going to try, baby. I promise." And she meant it. This wasn't just about a ghost from her past anymore. This was about her daughter. Her life. Her truth. And someone, somewhere, was hiding it from her. The moment Rachel saw him in person, the world stopped moving. It was Thursday afternoon. She knew from Denise that Daniel Harper, or whoever he really was, volunteered for the reading program every week at 3 p.m. sharp. Rachel had taken a personal day and waited in her car across the school parking lot, engine off, heart pounding. She wasn't sure what she was expecting. A man who looked sort of like Ethan? A stranger whose resemblance could finally put her mind at ease? She told herself she wasn't doing this for closure. She was doing it for Lily. At 2:57, a navy blue SUV pulled into the visitor lot. The man who stepped out wore khakis, a gray sweater, and the kind of relaxed smile that used to be Ethan's trademark before life, or death, had taken it away. Rachel leaned forward, breath caught in her chest. He looked older. A little grayer at the temples. His beard was neatly trimmed. Ethan never had a beard before. But the way he carried himself? That slight tilt of his head when he looked up at the building? The left-handed way he swung his bag over his shoulder? It was him. There was no doubt. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. The man she buried. The man she cried for. The man who had a memorial service with her daughter sitting on her lap and no body in the casket. He was alive. And he was walking into her daughter's school. When he disappeared into the building, Rachel didn't follow. She couldn't. Her hands were shaking too badly, and her legs felt like concrete. Instead, she waited. Every minute felt like an hour. She rehearsed what she would say, but everything sounded hollow in her head. By 3:45, the doors opened. A handful of parents and volunteers exited the school, chatting about books and classroom behavior. Rachel's eyes locked onto the last person through the door. Him. He paused on the steps, checking his phone. The light breeze caught the edge of his sweater. He turned toward the lot and froze. Their eyes met. For one horrifying, surreal moment, they simply stared at each other across the concrete. The spring breeze whistled through the silence. She could see it in his face, the exact moment he recognized her. His body stiffened. His jaw tensed. And then, like a reflex, he looked away. Not down in shame. Not overcome with emotion. He looked around. Like he was calculating an escape route. Rachel took a step forward, her voice shaking. "Ethan?" He flinched. But didn't answer. Instead, he turned fast and headed for his car, keys already in hand. "Ethan," she called again, louder this time. He was halfway across the lot now. Still no response. Rachel started walking quickly after him, her flats slapping against the pavement. "Don't you dare walk away from me." He reached his door, yanked it open. Rachel grabbed the edge of it. "I know it's you. You can lie to yourself, but not to me. Not after 5 years of burying you in my dreams every night." He stopped. His back was still to her. His knuckles white on the doorframe. Then, softly, barely above a whisper, "Rachel." She gasped. His voice. That voice. The same one that had said, "I'll be home in 20, don't wait up." He turned to face her. There it was. No more guesses. No more doubts. No more room for disbelief. It was Ethan. Not a man who looked like him. Not a voice that sounded close. Her husband. The one who held Lily when she had her first fever. The one who danced with her barefoot in the kitchen. The one who left without a trace. Alive. Breathing. Standing in front of her with guilt in his eyes and a different name on his badge. Rachel's voice broke. Why? He looked around again, anxious. Not here. Please. We can't do this here. Why? She snapped. Scared someone will hear your real name? Rachel, I'll explain. I promise. But not here. No, she said, shaking her head, tears spilling now. You don't get to set the terms. You don't get to choose when you come back from the dead. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. On it was a number. A different name. And a scrawl that said, Rockwell Park. Tonight. 8 p.m. She stared at the card like it might burn her fingers. Then without another word, he got in his car and drove away, again. Rachel stood alone in the parking lot, fists clenched, the card crumpled in her hand. She had buried him once. But tonight? She was going to dig up every lie he thought he left behind. Rockwell Park was nearly empty by 8 p.m. The sky was bruising purple, and the streetlights flickered on one by one. Families had gone home. Joggers had disappeared. Only the ducks remained, gliding across the pond in lazy circles. Rachel sat on a weathered bench beneath a maple tree, her fingers clenched around the wrinkled card Ethan had given her. 12 years ago, this was where he proposed. Now she was waiting to confront the man who had faked his death and left her to raise their child alone. When he finally arrived, she didn't stand. She just watched. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, wearing the same dark sweater he'd worn earlier. His face was thinner now, lined with shadows and silence. But those eyes, her daughter's eyes, still held pieces of the man she once loved. Rachel, he said, stopping a few feet away. Don't, she snapped, finally rising to her feet. Don't say my name like that. Like it means something. He nodded, taking the blow. You came. You asked, she said. I need answers. And I need them now. He exhaled, as if preparing for surgery without anesthesia. Okay. She folded her arms. Start with the truth. All of it. And don't you dare lie to me again. I didn't die, he said. Rachel laughed bitterly. No kidding. I was in trouble, Rachel. Serious trouble. I'd made some bad choices. Illegal choices. She stared him down. So instead of facing them like a man, you ran like a coward. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. I was working with clients who weren't exactly law-abiding, he said. Money was moving, offshore accounts, shell companies, all of it. At first, it felt harmless. Victimless. But the more I made excuses, the deeper I got. And when the feds started circling one of my biggest clients, I knew I was next. So you drove your car off a bridge and vanished? She spat. His voice cracked. I wanted to protect you and Lily. Don't you dare put that on us. I'm not, he said quickly. But if I'd been arrested, everything would have gone down with me. You would have lost the house, the insurance, your name would have been dragged through hearings. Lily would have grown up visiting her dad in prison. I couldn't do that to you. Rachel shook her head in disbelief. You already did. Just without the visits. He fell silent. Her voice softened, not with sympathy but exhaustion. And the funeral? The closed casket? Your parents falling apart in my living room? It was never supposed to go that far, he whispered. The body was never found. The authorities gave up. Once they issued the death certificate, I stayed gone. Rachel blinked, forcing herself to ask the question that had been burning inside her since she saw the little girl on the playground. Samantha. Who is she? His shoulders dropped. She's not mine, biologically, he said. Her mom, Cynthia, was a widow when I met her in Denver. We were both broken people, hiding different kinds of grief. She had a 3-year-old daughter. We didn't plan anything. It just happened. You replaced us, Rachel said, numb. You started a new life. I didn't replace you, he said, stepping closer. I buried you. Every day. I thought about you and Lily every damn day. Rachel didn't flinch. Not enough to come back. He paused. When Cynthia got sick, pancreatic cancer, she made me promise to take care of Samantha. I did. I became her legal guardian after she passed. She doesn't know anything about my past. Not my real name. Not that I have another daughter. Rachel stared at him. Lily recognized you, you know. She saw you before I did. I know, he said, his voice breaking. I panicked. I never thought we'd end up in the same place. We only moved here last month to be closer to Cynthia's mother. Who works at a school, Rachel snapped. With my daughter. You couldn't have written that script better. I didn't plan any of this, he said. She turned away for a moment, pacing along the edge of the pond. Her voice dropped low. Do you know what it was like? Explaining to a 4-year-old why her dad wasn't coming home? Watching her draw pictures for your grave? Telling her it wasn't her fault you died? I can't imagine, he said. No. You can't. Silence hung between them like fog. Then, quietly, so what now? Rachel turned slowly to face him. That's your mess to figure out. I'm not your wife anymore, Ethan. I may still be legally married to you, but I buried you. I grieved you. I moved on, at least as much as anyone could. He nodded, swallowing hard. I understand. You'll tell Lily the truth, she said. With me in the room. And a psychologist present. She deserves that. I will. And your parents? His face paled. They'll hate me. They already buried a son. Now they have to unbury a lie. Deal with it. He nodded slowly. And Samantha? I'll find a way, he said. A gentle way. She's just a kid, Rachel. So is Lily, Rachel said coldly. But she's living with the consequences of your choices. They stood in silence. I'm sorry, he whispered. Rachel's eyes welled, but she didn't let the tears fall. Not this time. Not enough. She walked past him without another word, the gravel crunching beneath her feet like bones. Behind her, Ethan didn't call after her. Because he knew he'd already said too much, and still not nearly enough. Saturday morning arrived with a kind of stillness that felt unnatural, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Rachel had spent the night rehearsing every possible version of what might happen. Lily could cry. She could scream. She could retreat into silence. Rachel had consulted with a child psychologist, Dr. Miriam Cross, who sat patiently in the living room, clipboard in hand, ready to guide whatever came next. At exactly 10 a.m., Ethan knocked on the door. Rachel opened it, took one look at him, and nearly closed it again. He looked smaller somehow, like a man halfway through his own unraveling. He held a stuffed bear in one hand, the one Lily used to sleep with, and a folder in the other. Lily sat curled up on the couch, hugging her knees. When she saw him, her expression didn't change. She just blinked. Studied him. He knelt down to her level, kept a respectful distance. "Hi, Lily," he said softly. "It's me. Your dad." Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. "I know this is confusing. For a long time, we all believed I was gone. And I let that happen. I let people think I had died." "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan swallowed. "Because I made mistakes. Grown-up mistakes. I was scared and selfish. And I thought disappearing would fix everything. But it didn't. It just hurt you. And your mom. And that's on me." Lily looked at Rachel, then back at Ethan. "But you were alive the whole time." "Yes," he said, tears threatening now. "I was. And you never came back?" He shook his head. "I should have. Every day, I wanted to. But I didn't. And I'm so sorry." Lily stared at him for a long time. Then finally, she asked, "Do you still love me?" Ethan broke. "More than anything." Without warning, she got up and walked over to him. She didn't hug him. She didn't cry. She just placed her small hand on his, like she was testing if he was real. "Okay," she said. "But you don't get to leave again." "I won't," he whispered. "Even if I have to go away for a while. I'll stay in your life. However I can." Dr. Cross nodded gently from the corner. "That's enough for today. Let her process." Rachel excused herself to the kitchen and finally let herself cry, tears of heartbreak, exhaustion, and maybe just a trace of something like relief. That Monday, Ethan turned himself in. With the help of a lawyer Rachel referred him to, he arranged a voluntary confession to the U.S. Attorney's Office. He disclosed the offshore accounts, the client names, the money trail. The assistant district attorney, surprised by the rare honesty, agreed to pursue reduced charges in exchange for full cooperation and restitution. By Thursday, the headlines had hit local media. "Man declared dead turns up in Oregon, faces federal charges in financial fraud disappearance." Neighbors whispered. Rachel's phone buzzed nonstop. But she said nothing. Not to reporters. Not to colleagues. Not even to her closest friends. Because the truth was too big. Too raw. Too personal to summarize in a soundbite. Ethan was formally charged with obstruction of justice, wire fraud, and falsifying his death. Thanks to his voluntary return and cooperation, he was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility with eligibility for early release after 12. Rachel sat in the back of the courtroom during the sentencing. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. When the judge read the final decision, Ethan looked back at her. She nodded once. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was acknowledgement. Telling Ethan's parents, David and Marlene Taylor, was another battle. They didn't believe it at first. Marlene hung up when Rachel first called. David showed up at her doorstep 2 hours later, face pale and wild with disbelief. "You're telling me my son's alive?" he said. "After 5 years in the ground?" "He was never in the ground," Rachel said softly. "That's the point." When Ethan met them at a neutral location, a counselor's office, Marlene fainted. David didn't speak for a full 10 minutes. "I buried you," he said finally. "I carried your ashes to the sea." "I know," Ethan said, breaking down. "And I can never undo that." They didn't forgive him either. But they showed up the next week to visit Lily. And slowly, their grief shifted into something closer to cautious healing. Meanwhile, Lily surprised everyone. She didn't spiral. She didn't shut down. Instead, she became curious. She asked questions. Smart ones. Hard ones. Why didn't Dad tell you the truth? Why do grown-ups lie to protect people when it hurts more? Rachel didn't have perfect answers. But she answered anyway. Lily met her half-sister, Samantha, 3 weeks later. They were awkward at first. But something clicked when Samantha showed Lily her rock collection and Lily showed her a trick with string loops. Within an hour, they were giggling like they'd known each other forever. Rachel watched from the kitchen and whispered to herself, some part of them already had. Rachel returned to therapy. She began journaling again. She even joined a support group for women who had survived betrayal, though none of their stories involved fake funerals. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, she sat in her backyard with a glass of wine and stared at the sky. She didn't feel triumphant or healed, but she felt clear. This was her life now. Not the one she wanted. Not the one she chose. But the one she would live on her own terms. It had been 6 months since Rachel sat on that park bench and learned her husband was still alive. 6 months since the grave she'd stood over became meaningless. Since Lily's world cracked open and somehow, miraculously, didn't collapse. 6 months, and somehow, life didn't just go on. It reshaped. Rachel didn't forgive Ethan. Not completely. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she no longer hated him. Hate, after all, required a kind of closeness she no longer offered him. He wasn't her husband anymore, not really. Not in the ways that mattered. What they had belonged to another lifetime, another version of herself. A woman who still wore her wedding ring and believed the future was fixed. That woman was gone. The one who remained was stronger. Sharper. Wiser. And she was learning, slowly, intentionally, how to heal on her own terms. She started running again. Picked up an old sketchbook she'd abandoned years ago. Started cooking from scratch, not just microwaving frozen dinners for survival. She even dyed her hair a little redder, just because she could. And every Friday night, she and Lily had Mom and Me Pizza Plus movie, a sacred ritual, no exceptions. Lily had adjusted in her own way. She didn't talk about her dad much. But she didn't ignore him either. She saw Ethan once a week, supervised visits, always on her terms. Sometimes they read together. Sometimes they just sat in silence. Other times, she asked questions Rachel didn't hear the answers to. Lily was different now. Not hardened. Just deeper. More aware of the way people could break promises and still try to love you after. And then there was Samantha. Rachel remembered the first time the girls met, in the community center rec room. 2 kids sitting across from each other with matching eyes and no script for what to say. They didn't shake hands. They didn't hug. They just stared. Then, after a long silence, Lily said, "You like dogs?" Samantha nodded. "My mom's allergic," Lily sighed. "But sometimes we watch rescue videos." "Me too," Samantha grinned. And just like that, like a match catching flame, something warm ignited. They weren't just half-sisters. They were survivors of the same storm. 2 girls navigating the wreckage of adult mistakes and somehow finding peace inside it. Within weeks, they were swapping books, building Lego cities, and arguing over which version of Frozen was superior. Their laughter, that shared, high-pitched laugh, became the new soundtrack to Rachel's home. And though the situation was far from traditional, Rachel started to find comfort in its messiness. Ethan, true to his word, accepted every consequence. He served his sentence without protest. Wrote weekly letters to Lily, some she read, some she didn't. He spoke at a financial ethics seminar arranged by his lawyer. Apologized publicly. Privately. Legally. And, eventually, meaningfully. He never asked Rachel for a second chance. Instead, he asked her what boundaries she needed to feel safe. She told him. He honored everyone. One day, as fall rolled in and the leaves began to crisp, Rachel found herself walking past the local bookstore. In the window was a new children's title about blended families. The cover art showed a messy kitchen, two sisters baking with mismatched aprons, a tired mom sipping coffee at the counter. Rachel walked in and bought 3 copies. That night, Lily and Samantha read it together on the couch, heads leaning into each other like they'd always belonged in the same frame. Rachel stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them. She thought about everything they'd lost. Everything they'd survived. Everything they were building, imperfect, improvised, and entirely real. And she smiled. Not because it was over, but because it had begun again, on different terms. Hers. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't erase the nights Rachel cried alone on the kitchen floor. It doesn't rewrite the story Lily had to tell herself to fall asleep without her dad's voice down the hallway. It doesn't undo the funeral, the grief, the years spent learning how to live without someone who was never really gone. What forgiveness does, if it ever comes, is open the door. Just a crack. Enough to let in some light. Enough to breathe again without bitterness clogging every inhale. Enough to give the kids a chance to build something new from the ashes adults left behind. Rachel didn't forgive Ethan because he deserved it. She forgave him, slowly, partially, with guardrails, because Lily deserved peace. Because Lily was still young enough to believe in second chances. Still soft enough to ask hard questions without venom. Still brave enough to sit beside her half-sister on the couch and say, "It's okay. We both got a little broken. But we're fixing it." And maybe that's the point. Forgiveness, in its truest form, isn't about erasing pain. It's about choosing not to live in it forever. Rachel didn't go back to Ethan. She didn't return to who she was before. But she did reclaim her power. She drew her boundaries. She protected her daughter. She rebuilt her life, not as a victim, but as a survivor with a voice. And in doing so, she gave Lily the space to love both her parents, even when one of them failed her. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing a mother can do.